What do we mean when we say that this child cannot access this program? What do we mean when we say that this child can't learn? How is that a statement that we can say as educators they can't learn? That is not true. Every brain can learn.
What is good, y'all? It is your boy, Jonathan Dumas, and this is Highly Visible and a Little Misunderstood, the podcast where we talk about complex things in nuanced ways. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you are a returning listener, shout out to you. Thank you so much for coming back. You already know we're going to have a good time. This is episode 2 of our series, Entrepreneurial while BIPOC. And last week, episode 1, we chopped it up with my friend Theon Freeman, who is the multi-hyphenate extraordinaire, where we talked about his journey into entrepreneurship after being laid off 3 times. And I encourage you to check that out. But for this week, we're going to keep that party going. We have somebody else who's going to drop some gems. Before I introduce my next guest, I want to just talk about something very important. Something very, very important. Free stuff. I know y'all like free stuff because I love free stuff. And I wanted to share just an opportunity that we're going to be doing right now or continue to doing for the first 100 people to sign up for our email list. So if you want free stickers, this one, both of them, go ahead and take a moment to sign up for our email list down below in the description link. I will wait. Click it. Go ahead. Name, last name, yes, email. Fantastic. All right, that's as simple as it is. Now to our guest. Today I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Alyson Kaneshiro to the show. Alyson is one of those people who just radiates wisdom, warmth, and a bit of that "don't worry, I got you" vibe. She's got over 2 decades of experience in education, specializing in special education services, action research, and equity facilitation. And she spent the last decade here in California, Oakland specifically, learning how to bridge the cultural gaps, especially in predominantly white spaces. The thing that really stands out about Alyson and something that I really admired, like listening back on our conversation, is how she views education. Education, to me personally, and what you'll hear from Alyson, is not just a way to fill people with facts. That's not educating anybody, right? But as a way to teach them how to learn. We had an incredible conversation. Alyson did a little coaching with me, and it was eye-opening, to say the least. And it really got us talking about our own educational journeys and our work experiences and different things like that and how they shape us. And that is the work that she does. So I'm really excited for y'all to listen in on this. And hopefully you found your new coach, tutor, whatever. But before we get to that conversation, we are going to roll into our segment, Hidden in Plain Sight, Stories We May Have Missed. All right, y'all. So today we're diving into a hot topic, U.S. employment rates and that ever so popular phrase, people just don't want to work anymore. Now, I have said this a lot on the show. I'm an organizational psychologist. That means I study social behavior in work. That means I am obsessed with work. That means I am looking at work all the time. This topic was inspired because the other day I was waiting in line, a long line, at an understaffed rental car spot in Denver. And not gonna lie, it was very, very chaotic. And thankfully for that person behind the desk, everybody had a really good attitude. They recognized like this is not his fault. After a few different incidents happened, a couple of folks, came back into the spot, their car wasn't ready or whatever, and they started talking, right? Almost inevitably, one of them said the phrase, people just don't want to work anymore. Right? They want all these accommodations, they want special treatment, they want all this and all that. And it's just not true, right? It's just a weird misconception based off, social media, passing phrases that we heard. So let's set the stage with a little bit of quick facts. As of July 2024, the U.S. unemployment rate is 3.5%. Yet there's still this talk about job vacancies and folks quitting left and right. And so what gives? The pandemic didn't just disrupt our lives. It made us rethink what we want from work, what we want from our jobs, what we want from our careers, and ultimately what we want for our lives. The job openings rate hit an all-time high of 7.4% in 2021, and people have been quitting at record rates, 2.7%. That is the highest since 2000, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. But it's not that people don't want to work. They just don't want to work in the jobs that don't respect their time, their mental health, or values. Why would we continue to work in a place that doesn't value who we are? Let's talk about Gen Z for a second. A Deloitte report shows that 44% of Gen Z workers would leave their current job within the next 2 years, mostly over concerns about work-life balance and mental health. They're demanding flexibility, transparency, and respect, things that are becoming non-negotiable for all generations. Even a McKinsey survey found that 40% of workers globally might leave their jobs in the next few months. People want more than just a paycheck. They want jobs that align with their values and respect their need for balance. And that's not laziness or people not wanting to work. That's wisdom. And I'll just leave it at that. Let's get to our conversation with Alyson. Let's get into it. So, Alyson, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you on the show. How are you doing this morning? This afternoon? I don't know what time it is. I'm in another time zone this week, so I don't know what's going on.
Oh my gosh, I feel that. Good morning. Yes, I'm in Oakland, California. It's about 9:20. It was a really great morning for me. I was able to take some time to journal in preparation for our conversation. I'm
Awesome.
So excited to reconnect with you again and have a great conversation about entrepreneurship today.
Yeah, me too. I love work, and I mean that in the context of I love the study of work because I'm an organizational psychologist. I mean, I feel like my listeners are really tired of hearing that, but I just love to study work. Always been fascinated with work. And within a US or American context, it's a big, gigantic part of our lives. And so I think the added layer of us both being entrepreneurs, I think we're choosing to to work a significantly more amount more than maybe somebody who works for another does a W-2 job, and also add another layer of stress. So it's so interesting to talk to entrepreneurs because they get it.
Oh, absolutely. And I was thinking about that as we were, in our cohort. That's how we met, in a BIPOC business cohort, and just thinking about the first time I saw all of us in the Zoom room together and how it felt to have this affinity with other people that I feel like are really driven, but really heart-centered and have shared values, and also know what it feels like to experience the highs and lows of entrepreneurship while just trying to put on a good game face for everyone.
Yes.
And navigating all the things that we maybe never grew up learning. Or maybe grew up learning from a distance, not actually having it modeled. For me personally, in my home, and we will probably talk more about that. And but I felt a strong affinity for everyone that is on the same journey.
Yeah, no, I resonate deeply with that. I think I've been in spaces like that before, but I think in a long term kind of sort of collaborative, but just grouped together where we're on this journey. And sometimes when you go in there, you're like, oh man, I'm so far behind. And then you're like, nope, you're right where you need to be. And then other parts, you're like, oh, I am a little bit ahead here. And so the balance and connection and even, gut check and just sharing your resources, all those different things is just really, really cool to see. And we're all entrepreneurs of color. So it's just those added layers, there's no extra explaining. There's no all the other stuff that you have to with other little learning things that are group things that I've been a part of. This was just a really, really dope time. I freaking loved it. It was dope. Awesome. So yes, we did meet in the Ready to Leap cohort, which is now Ready to Liberation. Shout out Carissa Begonia. I'm going to literally shout her out throughout this series, y'all, all the time because she's amazing. Follow her stuff. But I would love for you to just share yo, who is Alyson? What do you do? What are you passionate about? What's fun for you? Favorite color? All the things.
Amazing.
Yeah,
thank you so much. I really love this. When I again was journaling about this, I would say that I am first, the roles in my family. I'm a daughter, sister, cousin, auntie, and friend to many people. I think the identities that stand out for me, among many others, are that I identify as Japanese Okinawan and a woman. And my work professionally is in education, and specifically centered around addressing learning challenges in school settings. my background is in special education. And so my work now, it's been 20 years since
Nice.
I started in education, and my work now is split. I'm part-time at a school in San Francisco as an associate director of learning services. So I still get the benefit of working, in groups with other educators, during that time. And then I also run a private practice called Learning Specialist LLC, where I
Nice.
coach students one-on-one and run workshops for educators. And I'm growing my practice to include consulting and coaching for educators.
Okay.
I'm in California, but my home is in Hawaii. That's where my heart is. That's where, I grew up. And I would love to bring some of my work there. And so we'll see what comes of that. But I also want to expand to supporting parents and other caring adults who might be like psychologists or other specialists who want to be a part of a team and lead a tailored approach to supporting children with learning differences who are experiencing challenges navigating school and sometimes the expectations that just come with life. So that's where I'm going. That's where I am. But thank you for that question.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And 20 years of education. Shout out to you. Because I was in higher ed for 4 or 5 years, and I was just like, I'm good. I'm solid. I'm good. So 20 years of education, legitimately, like you deserve like a plaque, a giant like thing somewhere engraved somewhere. Because it's not easy. It really, really is not easy.
I would say the same for you. I mean, I spent 2 semesters and just teaching one class as an adjunct professor, and I was out. I said, this is not for me. This is like it feels very much like I'm starting at the bottom rung, and I need to do all these things to prove myself in what feels like an extremely extractive system. Of course, this is highly biased. Obviously, I left, but in feeling like I have to learn all these new rules and do all these things like to get a tenure and to get approval from so from more white men that are going to have to prove, the work that I'm doing. I absolutely don't want to do any of that anymore. And so that was decision that there was a decision point where I could say, oh, do you want to go into academia and pursue that path? And I was in my 30s. I'm like, I'm tired. I'm done. I'm going to actually go do other things. Work with students and bring me joy and work on, in doing those types of things as a practitioner and bring my knowledge and skills there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So 5 years, you need a plaque. You should get a plaque, a scholarship.
Well, they gave me 50% off my master's degree. I guess that's
exactly. Discounts on discounts on discounts. Forever. Exactly. That's what you should get.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
I'm there.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's hilarious. So why education though, Alyson? Because I feel like it's just like, I don't know. It can be thankless. It can be, and I think sometimes you don't see the rewards in the work that you're doing and the work with the students.
Right.
I have like a list of teachers that like. Here's my book idea, Alyson. I know I started the question and then I'm gonna tell a story, but here it is. So my book. Yes, I love tangents. You're on the podcast with ADHD. You already know. So my book idea is literally like I want to write a book of like gratitude. And just like there's moments throughout my like educational journey, entrepreneurial journey, like life journey of like just stories and written letters that if I could find these people that I would really love to write them a letter. Like Mrs. Duffy was the first person. Shout out second grade teacher, Mrs. Duffy. I don't know if she is still alive, but she, I thought she hated me. I literally thought she hated me. And I remember a parent teacher conference, and we were sitting in a parent teacher conference, and she was like, Jonathan is one of the brightest students I've ever had. And she was like, his reading comprehension is like unreal. Like the way he takes in all, and she started giving me all this high praise. I was like, who is this woman? And she also taught me how to blow my nose. Like she didn't
Oh,
have to do that. It's just like different things and moments like that. And I remember like that is one of the highlights in my mind of
yes.
like someone
Mm-hmm.
who,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just I wasn't used to receiving like care
Mm-hmm.
in the way that she did. And I don't know, I think I had this idea of her because the way she looked, she had, you know, RBF. But she was the sweetest, like she was incredibly kind and so sweet and
Right,
just like
right.
patient and just like, yeah, I don't know. It was so wild. And so I want to write a book of gratitude. Anyways, that's the
Amazing.
tangent of just like love letters to like these teachers, Mrs.
Love
Duffy,
it.
Mr. Ewing in third grade and sixth grade. I don't
Yes.
remember my earth science teacher in middle school, La Mesa Middle School, but like I
Right.
cried for her because I was the last person to get picked up after sixth grade camp. Anyway, so she
Yes.
just like hugged me. It was just like all these different like, you know, thank you letters of
Right.
gratitude. So anyways, back to the question. That's the
Yeah,
tangent.
I love that tangent. And we gotta come
Yeah.
back. I want to call back that at the end or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so what the question,
Why
uh,
education?
why education? Yes, and so I think you actually, I love your vignette or your story because it helps me to find connections in, you know, my personal story and upbringing. You know, we have histories on histories, and like you said, thank you letters. And you know, my mom was a second grade teacher, and she's probably the teacher that a lot of students also said, this lady, I don't know if she's down for me. She's always like telling me what to do, making sure I was doing it. And, you know, she had that balance. She is like the accountability lady, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and she really also was very warm. She would always look out for kids. She teach them how to, you know, do all the little things very, you know, motherly in
Mm-hmm.
that sense. And I think that growing up with a mom like that, who she was like a non-traditional student. She had to go to night classes. She actually stayed at home to take care of my brother and I growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So for a little while, she taught conversational Japanese at a high school part-time. And then she got her credential when I was in middle school, her teaching credential. She's actually trained as an accountant. And so I think similar though, in terms of just messaging, right? Asian women in Hawaii, there's a lot of us in education.
Okay.
So we see that as our profession, and there we go. You know,
Okay.
and there's a stereotype of that people joke about, like Joe Coy talks a lot about. He's a right. Shout out Filipino American History Month. You know,
Yep.
he's a Filipino American
Oh yeah,
comedian. If
comedian. Yep.
his work, and he talks about all the nurses that are Filipino female nurses, and
Uh-huh.
that's the track. And some of it is rooted in that, you know, where maybe we feel like an attainable goal. You know,
Mm.
being an Asian woman in education feels like an attainable goal. It's
Mm-hmm.
secure. It's something, you know, I think that was an easy choice for me. But my mom encouraged me to do what I wanted. But she also had my brother and I volunteer in her classroom
Okay.
when we were kids. And so I did that. I did summer fun, you know, so I was always one of those kids that like to take care of others.
Mm.
I was the oldest cousin. And so during the Olympic summer, I would create gymnastics
Amazing.
routines where we
Amazing.
had to, there's no internet, that we did not have cable. We
Mm-hmm.
had no Disney Channel. It was just the news all day. So we had to play. And so I
Yep.
was, you know, curating all these activities for everyone. So it was kind of came naturally. And I
Yeah.
just
Amazing.
enjoy doing that part of the education work. And then, you know, as I got older, I started to see how incredibly, I think, important the work is, that it was much more complex than just creating these cute little activities like arts and crafts and things like that, that maybe I
Mm.
thought it was growing up.
Yeah.
But I do have a natural sort of affinity to working with students. I struggled with math growing up, and
Mm.
you know, there's a dark side to the model minority myth, right? Where people think, oh, you're gifted and talented, so you have this, you're gifted in language, so you're good at writing. You must be good at math too, right? And so they put me in this track where I was totally struggling. They put me in gifted math. I didn't have the fundamentals. My parents didn't know. They're like, whatever the school wants, just follow what they do. And I was crying in my 7th grade class because my teacher was teaching from a worksheet. And this is the 90s. We have no internet. We have no technology, nothing to help me build my math fluency. Yeah. And later on, right, I realized like there's a lot of kids like me out there that might be able to mask, probably like you have great reading comprehension, but there's some executive function kinds of, places where you needed some explicit scaffolding and someone to just teach you, this is how you blow your nose, you grab this, and then this is the next step. And then you do all these things. And it's simple. So that's the part for me. I'm like, these are simple things that if we just have take a beat and think about the diversity within our classroom, and that there are very simple things we can do that benefit a lot of students. So that's like universal design. So I'm going off on a tangent, but I stayed in education. I stayed in education because, I had the privilege, I think the academic privilege, right, to be able to, with all the degrees I've had, I've been able to work at places that are really intellectually stimulating and want to focus on improving and growing as their educators. And so I learned about universal design and how that my background in special education can really benefit all students, right? So like designing curriculum the same way architects design buildings with the most accessibility, so that you don't have to retrofit and spend more time and money later on. Making them accessible, but thinking up front and being proactive and thinking about ways to be inclusive and design for the majority of people that can benefit.
I love that. And that's what universal design, it almost feels like designing education with an equity lens. Like that's
100%.
Yeah. Would that be like the simple? Is that what universal design is, or like?
I would say, so universal design for learning is it's a complex framework. So it's a way that you can design lessons, and the simplest form of it is that you have multiple forms of like representation, in terms of how you represent information, knowledge, multiple ways that you can engage with that, right? So giving students and students different options for engagement. So not like stigmatizing or pathologizing that some kids need a preferential seating. Some kids are going to need the calculator while others don't. That sort of thing. So in some ways, making the accommodations available to students to see that, those are things that those are tools you can access. So looking at all the different tools that we have, while not discounting that some students, right, that have learning disabilities will need those tools, and that it's not always appropriate to, just universally design for all, in the sense that we do have to prioritize the needs of students with disabilities who need a lot more repetition or structured choice and things like that. But what, again, it does is one of the, I think, byproducts of universal design is destigmatizing, accessibility tools that everyone can benefit using from, like, that's not a right word, benefit from. So like dictation tools, right? Audiobooks.
Yeah.
Incorporating those things into lessons to see that these are things that any person can use, but it's really critical for some of us who have dyslexia, some of us who have ADHD really need these tools to keep up, so that the playing field is level.
Absolutely.
So that we're all entering at a similar spot.
I love that. And that reminds me of a conversation I just had with a friend who just started teaching out of school, where I'm going to mess this up. I can't remember. She has at least like 9 kids that need extra additional support with some sort of like that needs some level of learning support, like additional learning support, and it's just her in the classroom. She has like 9, and she's like, I was like, that's a statistical anomaly that you would have 9 students in your single class of like 18. That's wild.
Yes.
But she's like, I'm only one person. I can't support them all
Yes.
like to the level that they absolutely need.
Wow. Yeah, and
Yeah.
so aligned with, universal design, prior to that, what I actually my whole dissertation is on this another framework called response to intervention, and that
Hmm.
is something that has to do with like literacy intervention. In terms of my dissertation, what we wanted to do was look at the typically, and this is how it relates, is that if you think of like a pyramid, typically at the top of the pyramid it's like a little point, right? And that's about 3%. So about
Mm.
3% of most classrooms, schools, generally speaking, when you look at the response to intervention sort of lens, it's about 3% of students that should need some kind of like intense or like special education
Hmm.
level support. And
Mm.
then there's a wider band there under there. So about, and the numbers fluctuate, but the majority of students that are at the bottom of that band, like about, I would say about 75, 80, that can benefit from tier one. Tier one
Mm.
is just, every classroom differentiation. Like,
Mm.
oh, you might need a little more time here. You'll get a little more time in this activity, easy kinds of adjustments to curriculum. And
Yeah.
there's like a middle tier in between those two, where some of the students will need a little bit more help. So
Mm.
when we would look at class structures, we would see how many students receive this level of intervention, that they need a plan, that they
Mm.
actually have to go through an evaluation, get special education support often, and then who is in the middle that needs more support, maybe some structure, and then the bottom where we can just differentiate and offer, some options there. And
Mm.
so to your point, you already instinctively knew, like out of 18, only about 3% should
Yeah.
need, but 3 to 5% should need, depending, on average. That's how the population typically falls.
Yeah.
But there's something going on there
Yeah.
in that
Very, very
classroom.
off. Yeah. Very, very off. And it's like, I believe she was saying like four of them were on IEPs, and then four of them were like,
Yeah.
she was like, there's nothing
Mm,
official here, but like I know like the symptoms that are like at place,
yes,
and just like,
I see.
you know, and so it's very, 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 yeah, very, very interesting, very, very interesting what she was sharing, that which also shows
Mhm.
like just like the inequities of is this the right word? Yeah, inequities within our
Yeah.
educational system, and like how it was designed, and like this like one size fits all approach to education. And I even think back to my own,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, throughout my educational journey of just like there's something missing. And I think I told, so I'm a recent diagnosed
Mm-hmm.
ADHDer. And
Mm-hmm.
so I told my partner, I said, Linz, if
Mm-hmm.
I had medication in college, I would have been straight A's, like easily, because I was
Yeah.
because like to write a paper, like I'm a good writer, but
Mm-hmm.
to go to your point earlier, that executive function, it is so hard. So I would spend, for a 5-page paper, a 1-page, it didn't matter how long it was. I would spend an
Right.
entire day in the library writing this
Right.
thing, because like it was excruciating to get all of the words out, and I didn't have like even a framework. Nobody taught me how to write like a paper or anything like that. But when you get, by the time you get to college, the expectation is like you have all the skills to succeed. Like, all right, do it.
Do
But
it. Just
but
do it. Yeah.
you don't, and we're gonna unpack all that. Depending on the high school you went to, how many resources were in there, with the quality of teachers that are there, because depending on where the social location of the
Right.
school, like there might not be the quality of teachers because they can't afford to pay those. I was in a
Yeah.
lower income like area, and that school did not
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of money. Quality of
Right.
teachers, i.e., did not
Yes.
match that. So on and so
Yeah.
forth, right? And so like all of
Right.
these skills that I was supposed to have, and I didn't even go to like some elite school. I went to a pretty shitty college. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so like this, even still, there's
Uh-huh.
an expectation every step of the
Right.
way that you have all the skills that you need to before, and it just doesn't work
Yeah.
that way. Yeah, it just
Right.
does not work that way
Right.
overall. Yeah. Yo, so I mentioned in passing the impact of money in public schools, but I wanted to talk about that a little bit more. It all comes down to property taxes. When we look at wealthier schools in wealthier neighborhoods, they often have more resources. According to the U.S. Department of Education, local funding makes up nearly half of all school funding. Wealthier areas generate more property taxes. That's going to equal better facilities, more extracurriculars, newer textbooks. Schools where they're in a lower socioeconomic area, they're struggling with outdated materials, bigger class sizes, fewer programs. A big reason why the education gap exists. And more money doesn't just mean better stuff or materials or whatever. It also means better access to opportunities. All right, let's get back to this conversation.
I imagine because you have a similar experience to some of the students that I've worked with getting a later diagnosis, because typically what's called child find, like in public schools,
Mm-hmm.
is that we are supposed to be observing students and making referrals, if we're seeing that students are, having, trouble organizing or what have you. I think that what is trickier nowadays, especially, is that there are ways to, cope with learning challenges, and then so that they can fly under the radar. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering for you, did you just continually experience a lot of learning roadblocks, or just like maybe you had some things show up for you in work where you felt like, oh, I really need to explore what is going on? I'm just
Mm.
curious what led you, because I hear what you were talking about in college. That's something I love to help students solve. Like, I got you.
Yeah.
I'll show you we'll chunk it, right? We'll scaffold it, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
help you every step of the way. Because a lot of times that's what's needed, just breaking that
Mm-hmm.
down, that process down, especially the writing process. It's so
Yep.
difficult for students. ADHD and executive function. It's multi-step. It is it requires planning,
Mm-hmm.
organization, time management, all the executive function skills together, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's so overwhelming for students who have had no intervention. And so for you, like, I'm just curious, how did you get from where you were in college to your diagnosis? Did something shift for you, or did you get the right resource or maybe
Mm.
advice?
That's a great question. So it actually, I don't think I would have ever saw a diagnosis if I didn't become an entrepreneur. Yeah, like I'm
Whoa.
not even joking. So,
Wow. I
so my
would not have guessed that. That's
it's
so cool to
it's
know.
wild. So so throughout my educational journey, like I'm just really good at copycatting or like mimicking and
Right.
like just being like a chameleon kid. Like that's just like, and so if something I
Mhm.
tried didn't work, I would look at what around in my surrounding areas like did work. And I'm like,
Mhm.
or like if I got correction or something like that, oh, I didn't get a good grade on that, all right, I'm gonna change and shift my strategy. So literally, like I would just experimentation and just try stuff.
Mhm. Right.
And so I think what's interesting is that like I flew under the radar for most of the
Mhm.
time because I was able to like mask really well and find like different my um my environment was my scaffold. Right, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like
Oh, yes.
surrounding
Yes.
yeah, I was surrounded by because I've been in the gate program since I was like third or fourth grade, and so like I
Okay.
always hung out in like I was never like the top performers because I always hung out in like the middle because I was like, all
Mhm.
right, just like trying to figure out like different methods. Like when I messed up, again, fixed, looked around me. So it wasn't
Mhm.
until even in college, like I was like, whatever, like it's whatever. Like I late bloomer even in college too. So
Mhm.
when I left the workforce, right, and not looking and didn't have any scaffoldings, like I was like,
Mhm.
why is this so hard? Because like I have the vision, I know this is going to work. I'm good at what I do. Why is this so hard? And like I talked to my therapist about it. And I had a friend who had gotten diagnosed, saw that diagnosis. I think I
Right.
kept just seeing stuff pop up in my feed and everything like that. And I just got more curious because I'm like, that's interesting. That aligns there. Um, I resonate with like 9 out of 10 things in this like ADHD video. Like, what's going on? And then thankfully, my therapist, um, his son has ADHD, and so he's the ADHD as well. So he like even recognized some of the things. So he's like, just take this
Mhm.
little survey thing, and I filled it out, and I was like, it's like super high. So then, I just went on this year-long journey of like really like trying to figure stuff out, get some planning
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
scaffolding, break stuff down, all these different things. And then it just became too much. And then I saw an actual diagnosis back in August.
Oh,
And
no.
then I literally, within 3 weeks, they were like, yeah, buddy, So like that's kind of, it was actually, honestly, that's a very short version, but it was
Yes.
like not 3.5 years. It was like a year and a half journey
Right.
of like
Right.
learning diagnosis, trying to figure out how to set myself up
Hmm.
well, blah blah. And I'm still trying to
Right.
figure it out. It's very very difficult, yeah, to like do it.
Yes.
But I would have never
Yeah.
found out if I did not become an entrepreneur. Like, I'm not even joking, because there was nothing. It was just me. It was nothing else for me to like model after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand because the external structures of school, perhaps,
Yep.
like they weren't there, so you don't have the feedback of from people even in your class. That was
Mm.
something we talked about during the pandemic where we
Mm.
saw students, their executive function skills really slid back, like regressed a couple years, especially in middle school. I was working in middle school at
Mm.
that time
Mm-hmm.
because not only is that period of brain development so critical, but right, so that's happening like sixth, seventh, eighth grade.
Yeah.
So what we were seeing is that when the eighth graders came back, their executive function skills were actually more like fifth grade because they weren't
Mm.
receiving the external cues from their classmates, and then
Yep.
even the teachers, they're on a Zoom and the teacher can't walk by and say like, hey, you're actually on the wrong spot.
Mm-hmm.
Here, why don't you focus on this? I'm going to cover this part. You don't need, right? So we couldn't
Yep.
monitor the workflow in the way that we could. So they're missing these cues and coming back, and we're trying to, you know, make up for lost time the best
Mm.
that we could. And so I can totally understand, as somebody observing students, feeling like they have a lot, have a lot to perhaps catch up on, what that feels like, what that process might feel like. And I know for some people, I'm wondering if this is true for you, some people feel actually like a huge sense of relief after
Mm-hmm.
they learn about their diagnosis, because it's less about like, why can't you, and it's more about, oh, this is why, and now I know
Mm-hmm.
that there are ways forward.
Yeah.
What was that for you? Or maybe it's changed.
No.
Maybe you thought one thing and it's different for you now. Just
No,
curious
no,
what.
that it was a gigantic relief. I think that there is, I think within education,
Mhm.
particularly, like I feel like this in my educational journey, is just that like if you don't get something, if you don't understand something, you're just stupid. Like there's something wrong with you, and like you don't
Mm,
fit into this system. Oh, it sounds like white
mm,
supremacy. You don't fit into the system, so like you will
right,
be pushed to the outskirts. And so like
right.
as somebody who, became an entrepreneur, entrepreneurial journey
Mhm,
is like a gigantic risk, and then like
mhm.
all these different things. Every single time I sat in front of my computer and like nothing would happen for 6 hours, 8 hours out of a day, like nothing, like I would feel like a failure every single day, like a just absolute failure. And so like to finally get
Yeah.
a diagnosis and like our diagnosis and just
Mhm.
be told like it's not necessary, there's nothing wrong with you, it's just your brain operates differently and there's actually a different path for you to like go. And so like even the language I use with my own coaching clients, with like when I'm talking to
Yes.
students or anything like that, when they use like language like I'm stupid or I'm dumb or
Mhm.
whatever, I'm like, don't you dare talk about yourself like that. Don't talk about my friend like that. Don't talk about my client like that. Don't do that. Like we really need to get that language outside of our out. Like it just needs
Right.
to not exist anymore, because I
Mhm.
think I think
Yeah.
it is really dismissive, not just dismissive, but it is what's the word? It helped me out, Alison. It's like it's
Uh,
dehumanizing. It's
yeah.
like
Yeah.
othering. It's like not
Yes.
even like acknowledging the,
Other. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really not
Othering.
acknowledging the difference that exists in learning, our learning capabilities and
Yes.
everything like that. And so
Right.
what if we were to
Yeah.
change our
Yes.
ideas of learning into like not necessarily you are a student fit into this mold, but rather you,
Right.
we are teachers. How do we teach you how to learn? Or how do
Exactly.
we like help you learn
Yeah.
and navigate this with you, right?
Yes.
Which I just
Yeah.
feel like it's just so backwards.
It is.
But
Yep.
yeah,
Because
so that's
what?
a feeling.
Yes. Because what you said sounds like white supremacy. Exactly.
Mm,
Right? Like, how is it that in Hawaii, where we have a totally different ethnic, and racial makeup in our
mm,
schools, right? In the continent where, in the contiguous 48 states, when I'm studying to be an educator, we learn about, there's like a lot of white female teachers, and that's an issue that these mainland or continent schools are dealing with. That's not our reality. We have a lot of Asian people who look like me.
Yep.
That's all theory that I don't understand that, right? Then they talk about the school to prison pipeline and over disciplining Black and brown boys of color. That's what we're learning about in my, and as a up and coming educator in the late 90s, early 2000s. Okay, but how does that translate to what we're seeing in Hawaii, where it's predominantly Native Hawaiian boys? Because we don't have the same population demographics. But how is that replicating? How is that practice in the gender and then, the Native population? How is that replicating itself across an ocean, across the Pacific Ocean?
Yeah.
It must be white supremacy, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there's similar colonialism, and that's the origin, right? When you look back at where the origin stories of these like Marvel villains, of these people, they're coming in, right? And using the same tools, right? The oppressors use the same kind of tools, and it shows up in ways where I think what I in my practice try to disrupt, right? Not asking critical questions, right? Thinking about the language that we use, asking ourselves, what do we mean when we say equity? What do we mean when we say that this child cannot access this program? What do we mean when we say that this child can't learn? How is that a statement that we can say as educators they can't learn? That is not true. Every brain, as we know, in neurodiversity can learn. That's what neuroplasticity is. Like at any age, like even the most severely, disabled person, there's still the opportunity for the most part, right, to be able to learn. So how is it that we have students that have a lot of brain potential, and we as educators, that's kind of my call to action always, like how are we reflecting upon what identity stories we're bringing, how we interact with the world, and what we are saying, right? How are we saying, what are we messaging, and are we checking our assumptions about what's going on, what we're seeing? Because there's a lot of power, I think, like to your point in your story, there's a lot of power in being affirmed by your teacher, of being seen like as somebody who has the smarts and the will, and every student I've ever come into contact with has something incredibly, like there's some incredible talent every student has. And so I think, like, for me, specifically leveraging those strengths has always been the pathway forward. You have to build, right? We have a negativity bias. We know this, right? You need 5 positive messages to undo the one, right? The one, that's like 5 to 1. That's as an advisor, someone working with the social emotional development with students. And adults too. Like, so if as kids we didn't get that, we definitely need that as adults. So your gratitude book is going to be life-changing probably for a lot of people, and can be really uplifting for you too, right? Like that, those positive experiences and those positive messages about these teachers that have seen you, and reminding yourself of those things to that will undo that one message. But if someone's getting 10 negative messages and never really hearing, they're just saying, never really hearing anything positive, just like, hey, this is what you need to work on. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to work on your executive function. You need to work on your time blindness. You need to work on finishing your task by this time, without ever talking about your incredible strengths. Like you run a whole podcast, you built a business from the ground up, you are, employing people who are important to you, and you're taking care of your people, you're a role model in your community, all those things that, I know that you are. And in addition to all the other things I don't even know, I think that that's so important in the work that, we do, and even just like what we put out. And I think in education, there's a lot of like people who don't understand their sphere of influence, like how much power that they have. because let's be real with it, people are trying to ban books, trying to tell us what we can say in classrooms
Yep.
because they're scared that we
Yep.
have a lot of teachers who know that we're not going to perpetuate these types of harmful messages, that certain people are not valued, that they should not be viewed as human, like you said, dehumanized, or should not be like allowed into spaces, because that's how they win, right?
Yep.
That's how
Yep.
that's how they win minds, and they don't actually they interfere with our hearts. And I think
Yeah.
that's the challenge. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's kind of why I stay in education, to continue
Yeah.
to that
Alyson
work.
spitting, fam. Spit. Oh my gosh. So one of the things that we did not mention, and I should have mentioned that, is that you're a doctor. So you just breaking down
Yeah.
the facts to folks. So yeah, doctor. So no, appreciate
Yeah.
that absolutely. And also, quick pause.
Yeah.
Alyson, we are about to hit 12. Do you have 10 to 15 minutes so we can get like a little bit extra? You do? Okay, cool, cool. Just want to make sure we get a good amount of footage for you.
Okay.
So, all right. And back into it.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing. So, everybody got a lot of taste of like all of
Hmm.
your knowledge, your wisdom, and definitely your passion as far as like education and the power of education and everything like that. I'm curious, what made that, so like being in education for 20 years,
Yeah.
and everything like that, what prompted you to make that transition to entrepreneurship then? Because that's I'm really curious.
Yes. I mean, yes, like you said, after almost 20 years of working in schools, public, so I worked in public for 12 years as a
Mhm.
services coordinator, special education inclusion teacher, private in the Bay Area, private schools, that university for, that minute when I first
That
moved to
hot
the Bay
second.
Area. Yeah. I just grew tired of feeling like too much of my time and energy was being spent on tasks,
Mm,
and busy work that comes with being employed and working for someone else. And I wanted to spend more time working with students, like on my terms, using the skills that I learned, and having some creative control over that, like being able to use different tools in different ways, that weren't necessarily the licensed tool that, we picked as a school and things like that.
mm,
And I really, really love the work of like listening to students' experiences. I think that is something that is missing from a lot of our research in education. Special education students are often not included in a lot of research studies,
mm.
in terms of like their firsthand experiences. And I think there's a reason for that. I have my own sort of theory about that. But what I wanted to do is first listen to what students were experiencing, have an opportunity to spend time processing what they were saying, and using my experience as a researcher and a practitioner, to offer them tools and strategies that were proven to work with students based on the like marriage of research and practice. That's my
Mm.
degree. We were the first cohort at the University of Hawaii at Manoa,
Mm.
to have what was called, it was the education doctorate in professional practice. So we had to find a problem of practice that we wanted to solve in education. And we needed to use all the resources that they taught us, like how to do qualitative research, quantitative, how to analyze data, how to work with a client and do a scope of work, and use all the different tools that they taught us to solve a real problem in one of our real life school settings. So as I
Mm.
mentioned, I did response to intervention, and I just wanted to get back to that work, but like not work for someone else's agenda, but work on projects and with clients and with people who wanted to work with me.
Mm.
I've been told numerous times by supervisors that I am the most underutilized resource at the school. So I was tired of
Mm.
being a moderately paid, underutilized resource. I
Mm.
wanted to, phase out of that, and, be, a person that can use my expertise to help people who wanted my help, like rather than
Yeah.
trying to help people who didn't really want to change. Perhaps, like, I really wanted to work with other change agents, people who get it, who want to be better at doing what we do and change the trajectory of
Mm.
the way that we're talking to kids, the way we're supporting kids, the way we're like talking to other educators, and like building a network of support within each other. Because even, you know, teachers and teacher leader, we're all human too, and we
Yeah.
bring
Yeah.
things. I think right now what's missing is sort of a space for us to catch up. You know, like
Mm.
I didn't do a lot of identity work. In fact, I did no identity work until 2015. I know what it
Mm.
feels like to have racial privilege and be like a pretty nice person, but
Mm.
like not have the resources to figure it out. And I really want to be in community with others. And in, you know, in the continent, I just happen to be with other white female educators because that's who's in my industry. And
Mm.
I want to work with other people who get it and want to do better the way that I did in 2015 when I came and had no idea what people were talking about. I'm like, what is DEI? What is
Mm.
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Mm.
What does it mean to be a woman of color? Nobody's ever called me that before.
Mm.
And so to like have all these terms thrown at you and like you're in this affinity space now. Like I never needed a racial affinity group, but
Yeah.
I need it now because the school spaces, like to your point, like these spaces aren't designed for us. They're not
Yeah.
designed for our racial identity to thrive, to be held. So then we have this like little group that we get to be a part of.
Yeah.
But those,
Yep.
you know, those things can still improve, right? We can have solidarity across, you know, that's sort of my vibe. I'd rather have cross cultural, all kinds of, you know, people that are anti-white supremacy, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't, to me, it doesn't really matter like
Yeah.
what racial identity you have. If you're anti-white supremacy, like we're in affinity, I
Yeah.
guess, you know, and so
Yeah.
focus more on that, I think, in terms of my work that I'm doing.
Yeah. I love that. And that's so dope. And I really do like hear that aspect of it because I like even something you said, right? Of like we have like our educational system and many
Mhm.
systems even work. We have these ideas where like literally these systems, the way work
Mhm.
is designed, education was designed,
Mhm.
it literally was not
Mhm.
designed with
Mhm.
black people in mind, Asian folks
Mhm.
in mind, any of that,
Mhm.
right? And so it's just really interesting to me that we have these curriculums and we have these systems and we're like, all right, okay, all this DEI stuff is popping up in like the last 10 years. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and fit like black folks, Asian folks, brown
Right.
folks, whatever
Yeah.
inside of this, right? Which it's literally trying to fit a square peg into a triangle
Okay.
peg. Like it
Yeah.
don't work.
Mhm.
And so for me, I lean closer to abolitionists where like we need to dismantle these structures
Yeah.
altogether and build something new.
Right. Mhm.
When people
Mhm.
hear that, they're like, "Oh, so it's just going to be broken and dismantled the next year?" No, jackass. It means we we go
Yeah.
through a
Yeah.
process, right?
It's
But
something new. Yeah.
yes, but it is incredibly difficult, if not, I would say more closely impossible, if not
Right.
incredibly difficult to operate and
Right.
function in a
Right.
system that was not designed for you because you're just constantly going to question, constantly going to
Yeah.
just,
Right.
prime example, you Alice, like you came and you're like, what the
Yeah.
f is this? Like I don't know what any of this is, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
so that's just
Yeah.
like I think your journey and story,
Mhm.
even the reason behind why you're in entrepreneurship is like a prime example of
Mhm.
like why this shit don't work. It probably
It does.
will
Yeah.
not work. And so like you decide to
Right.
build something of your own, which I love that.
Right.
I love that. And the heart and journey about that. And I'm really really curious for you too. Like, it sounds like now, like you had mentioned earlier that 2015 was like kind of the start of your own.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
Right.
Like understanding or start of your own journey of like understanding your identity and everything. Like, because before that you didn't have to. I'm
Right.
curious, as you're building your business. Well, two
Mhm.
questions. First, it was how was that journey for you, and then
Mhm.
how does it play out in your business now as you're building it out?
Yeah. So I think that one of the gifts that I received, you know, in education was having the opportunity to be a seed facilitator. So get
Mm.
certified as a seeking educational equity and diversity facilitator. And I think being in that relative position of power, facilitating a group that is focused on educational equity, like in hearing stories of identity using the framework of windows and mirrors to see differences and similarities in each other's stories, to build right solidarity across difference, to honor stories, and to do that work that needs to be done. I think that in terms of that sort of that facilitation work has really framed how I approach, the work that I want to do moving forward. Like that felt for me one of the most authentic sort of experiences of, taking some time using the things that I think matter in terms of growth, that I know that actually, in adult learning theory does actually transform people's understanding of themselves, right? It's like using inquiry and the critical part of thinking, right? Critical thinking, which again, calling back to those folks, out there, the politicians that don't want us to cultivate critical thinkers.
Yep.
Don't like the critical part of critical race theory. It's because it's people that can think for themselves and think about and make connections and do that sort of deep work that I think in these white supremacist capitalist structures, right, that I think we're both trying not to fall into, right, as entrepreneurs, but like that drive this unhealthy sense of urgency that is keeping us in a place of busy, of do, produce, and not really stopping and like what, and asking ourselves, what assumptions am I making? What is showing up for me, and what is actually like my values for my ancestors, from that wisdom, that place of, strength and resilience. What do I have to listen to, rather than trying to play that game, and I think that for me, I see that in education, like that's replicated in education as a form of, one of the industries of work, that other beautiful, amazing people who want to help kids are stuck in this kind of like this cycle of just shortcuts. So that's where bias happens, right? You're just stuck in this like pattern of shortcuts. And a lot of times when you're stressed and doing shortcuts, you're actually operating from the deep biases that were modeled for you, that you probably wouldn't want to admit was something in your, your history. But it's because, we have generational trauma. We have people who we're trying to survive and teaching us the best that we can. So I go off on tangents too. So
I love a good tangent.
I don't know.
You spitting.
I don't know if to answer your question. I'm like forgetting the question because I'm deep in this like conversation. Did I answer that first part?
So I'm gonna be real with you. You didn't, Alyson, but what you said was good. So I don't even care. Okay. So, but I would say, I would say, to the point, I think that to what you just raised is like the critical, like the aspects of critical like thinking, right? It's what's interesting is that like they're talking about freedom of choice, but like you are literally eliminating our ability to choose. Like that is the goal of all these bans, like what you're saying, like that's the goal, right? Which is like, what is actually learning? What we're actually instilling now in a lot of these countries and our countries, states, particularly in Louisiana, where I'm at right now, it's like they're literally reverting back to like 1932 with reproductive rights, with learning, with book bans and different things like that. It is absolutely wild. And as of our recording, October 14th was their election day, so their statewide elections, and like, I mean, I think the Republicans almost did a damn sweep, and like literally like the choice, and I wouldn't say it's all of the state, 27% voter turnout, you know what I'm saying? And so like that's abysmal. So so when we're talking about like folks who care about education and want free thinking and like actual choice and different things like that, to your point, it's like, one, get out and vote, but two, it's like we have to understand that critical thinking hard, being challenged, being uncomfortable, being willing to unlearn, like listen, like all these dynamics actually help us, not in just like classroom settings, right? But beyond, right? When we think about, which is the purpose of like education, right? How do
Right.
we do life well,
Right.
not just to get a good job, but to be
Right.
a good human being, right?
Right. Right.
And so that's the, it's like I bring up the election is like, when
Yes.
we eliminate this critical thinking portion of like, we just like, oh no, it's gonna be all right. No,
Mhm.
like we actually let's think about this like, in a grander
Right.
context. So
Right.
but anyways, but like, to get to the point, or to
Mhm.
go back to the question I asked, it's like,
Yes.
for your identity, a way of
Yeah.
like your as you like grown and learn like more about who you are,
Mhm.
what do you feel is, how has that played a role in like your
Mhm.
entrepreneurial journey, if it has at all?
Yes. Um, so I think that the identity piece has been, I think it's been a complicated journey, but very illuminating. So,
Hmm.
meaning that I had no knowledge of what my race meant, contextually beyond Hawaii. So
Mm.
it was like, for me in Hawaii, I think what I experienced mostly, which we won't get into, is like it's more of like a sexist sort of culture where
Mm.
men are elevated, any man elevated above a woman in terms of leadership and
Mm.
access to jobs and job security, things like that.
Mm.
On the flip side, coming here, um, I saw that race was actually something where I felt like that was the so that was the piece that I felt like people were, yeah, just like discounting what I could do, perhaps what I could offer, not seeing me as a leader in that particular way. And so I think for me, I decided, well, I'm going to do what I think that I'm good at. And in terms of my identity, it's like the identity and the culture piece is, growing up in Hawaii in a predominantly like indigenous culture, there's like that collectivism and relational trust that
Mm.
I see as something that is non-negotiable for me within, the dynamics of my identity, and
Mm.
that idea of building solidarity across difference. That's sort of the ethos of what happened, and and there's complexities, right, in Hawaiian culture, but there's one aspect that I think is true for my identity story around immigrants coming together, right? Because there was a time where there's a Hawaiian kingdom, and then some white folks came in and wanted to, commercialize the labor. And
Mm.
while they didn't enslave people, they did like, they created a system, white folks created a system where they benefited and had plantations and then
Mm.
had labor come in. And that's where my family came in. And they were
Mm.
in that, they were workers, right? They were not elites coming in, like the
Mm.
elites that were coming in, like academic elites coming into the continental US. They're coming in to work and be laborers because we
Mm.
didn't have, generational wealth. And so
Mm.
in there's evidence of those groups coming together, all the ethnic
Mm.
groups, Filipinos, Portuguese, Chinese, Japanese, coming together, and Hawaiians too in some cases, right? And creating their own culture, their own
Mm.
language, right? They were speaking different languages, create pidgin English to
Mm.
communicate, to like resist the oppressor, right? So
Mm.
the Luna, which is the person who oversees the plantation and the people benefiting, they actually came together to resist that sort of,
Mm.
to resist the oppressive conditions and things like that. And I think
Mm.
that for me is like part of my history and what I want to do in the work that I do. I want to build with other people. I want to like
Mm.
honor the differences we have, but create something new together that
Yeah.
is, that is better for us all. And so I think that is part of my identity, but maybe more of my culture and my
Mm.
values. But I've really started to understand that because people talk about solidarity all the time, but I don't
Mm.
actually see it because I've seen what it looks like in, like, I feel like there's a difference. There's a lot of talk. And I
Mm.
grew up, it's like where I grew up, it's like, don't be all talk, no action. That's like,
Yeah.
I'm like anti that. And
Yeah.
I think that is like the legacy of my people, of my community. It's like that we're gonna say what we don't like about something, and we're gonna try to change it, but we're gonna do it together. And we're
Mm.
gonna find our people, and we're gonna try to do it with like love and compassion and honor everyone's humanity in the
Mm.
process. And also resist and fight and bring out that warrior when there's people trying to come for us, because
Hell
it's not
yeah.
is not always the same, you know? Like, you don't
Yeah.
get agreement. Like, we're not going to be pushovers either. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, I think, where my identity comes
I love
in.
that. And I think that like I even, I feel and see like your identity or your values come through so like clearly, right? Of like, trust and connection, unlocking the superpowers, making action
Mhm,
matter, honoring identity
mhm,
and experience, and then the reflection is like key. And so
mhm,
I just like
mhm,
love every aspect of that, like being embedded as you talk about like not just the work that you do, but how you're
mhm,
going to do it, and even how you, I wouldn't say doing it differently, because like this is
mhm,
something that's like in you, right? And so it feels different to other people because they hadn't seen it actually done
mhm.
in a way that like matters, right?
Right.
And so I think that that's like one, a beautiful thing, and two, like I just like see that I fucks with it
Mhm.
heavy, and like absolutely about it, you know what I'm saying? Because I think it is I don't like fakeness. I don't like when people like say stuff like I got you, I got you, I got you, because I've had so many people in my life be like I got you, and then I'm like, where
Right.
you at? Like, where you at?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You damn sure weren't there in 2020. So I think that there is like a deep
Say, yeah.
yeah,
Mhm,
I think there is a
mhm,
deep I don't know,
mhm,
what is the word? I think that there's like understanding, but like embodiment, I would
mhm,
say, of like
mhm.
actual community. Cause and
Right.
I'm really like loving this in the last like year. I've like keep finding people like yourself that
Mhm,
like
mhm.
community, like actual
Yeah.
community. Like, what do you need? How can I help
Yeah.
you? I got some sugar for you if you need it,
Yeah.
like whatever.
Yeah.
Like we're not actual neighbors, but I'm just saying like
Sure.
there's just like
Yeah.
legitimate stuff of like what do you need? I got
Right.
you.
I'm gonna do. Mhm,
Yeah, and it's just like
mhm.
not this like transactional whatever. It's just like truly it's because you're another person, bro. Like you don't have to return this, you don't have to give anything back. Like I see you.
Right.
I see you in me, and I also see myself in you, whatever. Like this whole like reciprocal community
Right.
actual thing, which
Yeah.
I really do mess with heavy. And so I see it come through in what you do, who you are, and as you talk about your work. So I truly like want to honor that. I
Mhm.
just like love it so much.
Yeah.
I have kept you for so long. Um, this has been so
No,
fun.
I've kept myself here because it's such a joy to talk with you. And I'm sorry to like interrupt you, but I
No,
just
God.
have to say you're just incredibly talented as a facilitator. I can just only imagine how cared for and held your clients must be. They must be so lucky to have this like time with you, whether it's one on
Yeah.
one or in a
Yeah.
group. I could You're just like a magician. I don't know, magician, alchemist. I don't know. You got away with your words, your stories. You're so engaging. I mean, you're just an incredible entrepreneur and person. I mean, first and foremost, person. So I just
Yeah.
have really, really appreciated the time that we've spent together and the invitation to collaborate with you on this your podcast, which is so
Oh,
amazing. So many great stories.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much. If I could, I'd be blushing right now, but I'm just a tad bit too dark. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
This was
you,
an
Jonathan.
absolute
This was
joy. So
safe.
fun. Yeah,
Yes.
so many laughs. We got plenty of like little clips and stuff like that, I'm sure. Right, Reg. Um, I wish there was an emoji function so Reggie didn't just give me a thumbs up. But I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. But
Yes.
thank you so
Thank you.
much. Really, really, truly appreciate you. All
Yeah,
right.
same. Have a good day. I'll see you later.
Yep.